Have you ever noticed something strange? The loudest person in the room isn't always the one people remember. The person who talks the most isn't always the one who earns the most respect. And the one constantly demanding attention is rarely the one quietly changing the world. For years, we've been taught that success belongs to those who speak louder, move faster, and make sure everyone notices them. But history tells a different story. Some of the most influential people build extraordinary lives without being the loudest voice in the room. Not because silence is magical, not because being quiet automatically leads to success, but because they understood something most people never do. Silence is not the absence of power. Sometimes, it's the highest form of it. The problem is that society often misunderstands silence. If you're quiet, people assume you're shy. If you listen more than you speak, they think you have nothing to say. If you don't constantly share your achievements, they assume you don't have any. But assumptions are just shortcuts the human brain uses when it doesn't know the full story. And those shortcuts are often wrong. Think about the strongest person you've ever met. Not physically, mentally. Were they constantly trying to prove themselves? Or did they carry a quiet confidence that made everyone pay attention without asking for it? That's the difference. Real confidence rarely announces itself. It doesn't need applause. It doesn't need permission. It simply exists. Imagine two people walking into the same meeting. The first person talks from the moment they sit down. Every silence makes them uncomfortable. Every opinion becomes a chance to prove how smart they are. The second person listens. They observe. They notice the emotions in the room. They pay attention to what others miss. For most of the meeting, they barely say anything. Then, when everyone else has finished talking, they speak. Only a few sentences. Clear, calm, purposeful. And somehow, those few sentences carry more weight than everything said before them. Why? Because words become valuable when they're chosen carefully. Just like diamonds are valuable because they're rare. Thoughtful words gain power because they're intentional. Silence creates space. And in that space, people begin to listen. But let's clear up one important misunderstanding before we go any further. Being silent does not automatically make someone successful. A person can stay quiet because they're afraid. They can stay quiet because they doubt themselves, or because they fear being judged. That's not the silence we're talking about. The silence that builds success is different. It's a choice, not a prison. It's the ability to remain calm when everyone else is reacting. To listen when everyone else is competing to be heard. To think before speaking. To respond instead of reacting. That kind of silence isn't weakness. It's emotional discipline. And emotional discipline is one of the rarest skills in today's world. Look around. Every notification demands your attention. Every opinion fights for your agreement. Every platform encourages instant reactions. People answer before they understand, judge before they know, speak before they think. In a world addicted to noise, the ability to stay quiet long enough to think has become a competitive advantage. Because while everyone else is trying to be noticed, the silent person is learning, watching, improving, preparing. And that's often where real success begins. Not in the spotlight, but in the quiet moments nobody applauds. And that simple realization changes everything. Because the people who eventually build extraordinary lives don't become extraordinary overnight. They simply become comfortable doing ordinary things with extraordinary consistency. Think about an iceberg. The world only sees the part above the water. The recognition, the promotion, the business, the wealth, the influence. But beneath the surface lies something far more important. Thousands of invisible hours. failures nobody applauded, sacrifices nobody noticed, moments when quitting would have been easier than continuing. That's where success is actually built. Not in public, in private. This is one of the biggest advantages thoughtful, emotionally disciplined people often develop. They don't depend on external validation to keep moving. If nobody claps, they continue. If nobody notices, they continue. If nobody believes in them, they continue. Because their motivation comes from progress, not applause. Now imagine two athletes preparing for the same championship. One spends more time posting workouts than completing them. Every achievement is immediately shared. Every small victory becomes another opportunity to receive attention. The other athlete trains quietly. They don't disappear because they lack confidence. They disappear because they're focused. Months later, the competition arrives, and suddenly everyone says, they came out of nowhere. But they didn't. People simply weren't paying attention while the work was happening. Success often looks sudden, only because preparation is invisible. The same principle applies to every area of life. Relationships, careers, business, leadership. People who spend all their energy trying to look successful often neglect becoming successful. The truly dangerous mistake is confusing attention with progress. Attention feels rewarding. Your brain enjoys compliments, likes, recognition, approval. There's nothing wrong with appreciating those moments. The problem begins when they become your fuel. Because attention is unpredictable. Some days you'll receive it. Some days you won't. And if your confidence depends on it, your emotions will rise and fall with other people's opinions. That's an exhausting way to live. Emotionally mature people understand something different. They celebrate progress that nobody else can see. Reading one more chapter, practicing one more hour, learning one more skill, keeping one more promise to themselves. Those victories may never become headlines, but over time, they create a person whose confidence cannot be taken away by criticism, because it wasn't built on compliments in the first place. Here's another lesson that separates people who quietly succeed from those who constantly seek validation. They become comfortable with silence during conversations. Most people panic when silence appears. They rush to fill it. They speak just to avoid feeling awkward. But confident communicators understand that silence is not an enemy. It's a tool. A brief pause shows that you're thinking. It gives your words room to breathe. It allows the other person to process what you've said. Some of the strongest leaders aren't remembered because they talked the most. They're remembered because, when they finally spoke, people instinctively leaned in to listen. Not out of fear, not because of status, but because they had earned a reputation for speaking with intention. And intention is rare. In a world overflowing with opinions, thoughtfulness stands out. That's why silence, when combined with preparation, emotional control, and clear purpose, becomes one of the most underestimated strengths a person can develop. Most people spend their lives trying to be heard. Very few spend enough time becoming worth listening to. And that difference changes everything, because there comes a point in every person's life when they face a choice. Do you spend your energy trying to impress people? Or do you spend your energy becoming someone impossible to ignore? At first, the difference seems small, but years later, the gap becomes enormous. One person spends every day comparing themselves to everyone around them. They're constantly checking who is ahead, who is getting more attention, who is receiving more praise. Without realizing it, they've handed over control of their happiness to complete strangers. The other person chooses a different path. They compete with the person they were yesterday, not with the internet, not with coworkers, not with old classmates, just with themselves. And that's where real growth begins. Because comparison steals focus. Focus builds mastery. Mastery builds confidence. And confidence attracts respect. Think about the people you admire most. Maybe it's someone who built a successful company. Maybe it's an athlete. Maybe it's someone who overcame impossible odds. If you look closely, you'll notice something they all have in common. But beneath the surface, the roots are expanding, quietly, patiently, preparing for a future nobody else can see. Human growth works the same way. The strongest transformations are usually invisible in the beginning. Learning a new skill, improving your mindset, building emotional resilience, creating discipline. None of those things receive instant applause, but they create something much more valuable than applause. They create identity. And once your identity changes, your habits begin to change. Your decisions become different. Your standards rise. The people you surround yourself with begin to change. Even your conversations become different. Success isn't just about reaching a destination. It's about becoming the kind of person who naturally belongs there. That's why emotionally mature people protect their attention so carefully. They understand that attention is one of the most valuable resources they have. Every unnecessary argument, every meaningless distraction, every hour spent seeking validation is an hour that could have been invested in becoming better. Here's something most people never realize. Silence doesn't only mean speaking less. It also means quieting the constant noise inside your own mind. The voice that says, "You're not good enough. They're doing better than you. What if you fail? What will people think?" That inner noise has destroyed more dreams than criticism ever could. The people who quietly succeed aren't fearless. They simply refuse to let fear make their decisions. They hear the doubt, they acknowledge it, and then they keep moving anyway. That's emotional courage. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite it. When you develop that, you stop needing everyone to believe in you, because you've already made the decision to believe in yourself. And once that happens, your energy changes, your posture changes, your conversations change, your presence changes. Not because you're trying to appear confident, but because confidence has become part of who you are. People notice that, not immediately, not all at once, but gradually, almost invisibly, until one day, the same people who overlooked you begin asking a simple question. What changed? The truth is, nothing changed overnight. You simply kept growing while everyone else was watching for instant results. And that's the quiet advantage most people never discover. Because the world celebrates outcomes, but life rewards habits. Most people become obsessed with moments. The interview, the promotion, the championship, the launch, the opportunity. They believe that one big moment will change everything. But every remarkable moment is simply the visible result of hundreds of invisible choices. The choice to wake up when motivation disappeared. The choice to practice when nobody expected you to. The choice to stay disciplined when shortcuts look tempting. Those decisions never make headlines. Yet they shape every headline that comes later. Here's something fascinating about the human mind. Your brain is constantly building your identity from your repeated actions. If you repeatedly keep promises to yourself, you begin seeing yourself as trustworthy. If you repeatedly avoid difficult tasks, you begin seeing yourself as someone who quits. Identity isn't created by what you say. It's created by what you consistently do. That's why silent people who focus on action instead of image often build stronger confidence over time. Their confidence isn't based on positive thinking. It's based on evidence. Evidence that they've survived difficult days. evidence that they've stayed disciplined, evidence that they can trust themselves. And self-trust is one of the strongest forms of confidence a person can develop. Because once you trust yourself, failure becomes less frightening, criticism becomes less painful, rejection becomes less personal. Not because those experiences stop hurting, but because they no longer define who you are. Think about a mountain climber. When the wind becomes stronger, they don't argue with the mountain. They adjust their footing. When the weather changes, they don't blame the sky. They change their strategy. Successful people think the same way. They waste very little energy asking, "Why is this happening to me?" Instead, they ask, "What can this teach me?" That single question transforms obstacles into education, mistakes into experience, failure into preparation. And over time, preparation becomes confidence. This is why emotionally disciplined people appear calm under pressure. It's not because life has been easier for them. It's often because life has challenged them more than anyone realizes. Every setback taught them patience. Every disappointment taught them perspective. Every difficult season taught them resilience. Pain became their teacher, instead of becoming their identity. Now imagine living with that mindset for 5 years. Every single day, you read a little more. You complain a little less. You improve one skill at a time. You protect your peace instead of proving your point. You choose consistency over excitement. At first, nobody notices. 6 months later, very few people notice. A year later, some people begin asking questions. 5 years later, people call you lucky. They'll never see the thousands of ordinary mornings that created what they now call overnight success. Because success has a strange habit. It whispers for years, before it finally speaks loud enough for the world to hear. And those who understand this stop chasing quick results. They start building permanent character, because they know something that changes everything. A loud reputation can disappear in a single day, but strong character continues creating opportunities long after the applause has faded. And when your character becomes your foundation, you no longer fear being overlooked, because you understand that the greatest victories are often built in complete silence. Because you understand that the greatest victories are often built in complete silence. And maybe that's why silence has always been misunderstood. People often mistake it for hesitation, when sometimes it's preparation. They mistake it for weakness, when sometimes it's self-control. They mistake it for a lack of confidence, when sometimes it's confidence that no longer needs to be announced. Imagine an archer standing in front of a target. Before the arrow moves forward, it must first be pulled back. From the outside, it looks like it's moving in the wrong direction. But that backward movement creates the power needed to move farther than anyone expects. Life often works the same way. There will be seasons when it feels like you're falling behind. Friends will seem more successful. Others will receive opportunities before you. People who put in less effort may appear to move ahead faster. Those moments will test your patience more than your ability. Because patience is easy when everything is going well. Real patience is staying committed when nothing seems to be changing. And that's exactly where most people quit. Not because they aren't talented, not because they lack potential, but because they confuse slow progress with no progress. The truth is, growth is rarely dramatic. It's almost invisible while it's happening. A stronger mindset isn't built in one motivational speech. It's built through hundreds of ordinary decisions. Reading instead of scrolling, listening instead of reacting, learning instead of complaining, improving instead of comparing. Day after day, week after week, year after year. Eventually, those small decisions become a different life. Here's something worth remembering. The world rewards people who solve problems, not people who constantly talk about them. The quieter you become, the more you begin observing. The more you observe, the more you understand. The more you understand, the better your decisions become. And better decisions create a better future. That's why successful people often ask more questions than they answer. They're not trying to appear intelligent. They're trying to become wiser. Wisdom grows through curiosity, not through constant talking. Think about every meaningful conversation you've ever had. Chances are, the person who left the biggest impact wasn't the one who dominated the conversation. It was the one who truly listened, who made you feel understood, who spoke with clarity instead of quantity. That's the power of intentional communication. Not more words, better words. And perhaps, that's the greatest lesson of all. Success isn't about becoming louder than everyone else. It's about becoming so grounded in your purpose that noise no longer distracts you. Because the loudest voice doesn't always change the world. The clearest vision does. So if you've spent years believing your quiet nature is holding you back, maybe it's time to ask a different question. What if your silence isn't your weakness? What if it's the foundation of your greatest strength? Not because silence itself creates success, but because it gives you the space to think more deeply, learn more intentionally, act more wisely, and grow without constantly needing approval. From this day forward, stop measuring your progress by how much attention you receive. Measure it by the promises you keep to yourself, by the habits you build, by the discipline you protect, by the person you're becoming when nobody is watching. Because one day, the results you've quietly worked for will become impossible to hide. And when people ask how you became so successful, you'll know the answer. It wasn't one lucky opportunity. It wasn't one perfect decision. It was thousands of silent choices, made consistently, long before anyone believed they mattered. If this message changed the way you think, subscribe to Silent Rise for more psychology, self-improvement, and mindset documentaries designed to help you build lasting confidence, emotional intelligence, and real success. Until the next video, stay patient, stay disciplined, keep learning, and remember, the loudest person may win the moment, but the person who masters themselves often wins a lifetime.